With Alexander King, let's bring back in our think tank, Teresa Jean-Pierre Coy. Does the color of his skin, of this defendant's skin, this former officer, have any impact on what's going to happen inside that courtroom during the second trial?
You know, I hate to give you the lawyer answer, but it might. It depends on who's on the jury and who wants to take that into consideration. But I think the fact that, this was a young rookie cop, and again, Chauvin was acting as the one in charge, is really what the jury is going to focus on. I mean, I know we can sit back and look at this after the fact and say that he should have done this and he should have done that. But, it's kind of like when you're in high school, you're a freshman, you look up to the seniors and you kind of, have this mentality of you do what they say and you don't want to ruffle any feathers. So I think that's the defense that these three are going to go for. And I think that it may actually work for them. But I don't think, as far as the color of his skin, again, it depends. I'm not sure how it's going to come in. But, if he testifies, he might talk about that. But I don't know if it necessarily would, help or hurt his case. It really just depends on what the jurors think.
Shawn Collins, what do you think's a bigger impact in the case against King or his defense? The color of his skin, the fact that he's a rookie?
Yeah.
What do you think has the biggest impact on his case?
Well, he's going to try to work both of those. But the reason I am disappointed that these trials are severed is because these three defendants, that's the most important trial. That's the most challenging issues. What are their duties? They're the most important under the law. They're the most important to society. When those three officers, and I don't care how little their training was or how long they'd been on the force, their duties don't change. When they see a senior officer turn from an officer of the law to a criminal, to someone who's squeezing the life out of someone, they don't any longer have the right to just make suggestions. And that was the word that Lane used in the interview that we heard in the last segment. He made what he called a suggestion to Chauvin. No, you don't take yourself off the hook that way. You don't get away with that. Your job is not to make suggestions at that point. You are duty bound to protect the public and an innocent man who's moments away from dying, according to his own words. So whether the jury takes most into account the color of his skin or the color of his uniform or how little his training was, I hope all of those things are set aside and the focus is on that's a police officer. He's watching a crime being committed, and his job is to protect life at that point, not to allow the crime to continue to be committed.
Another one of the officers that was there that day is Tu Tao. He's the one who doesn't even touch George Floyd. He's the one kind of doing crowd control with some snarky remarks. Let's take a look.
Bro, look, well, you should check on him. He's not responsive right now.
Back off!
He's not responsive.
Get off the street before you run. Okay, then you wouldn't know.
He's
Get off
not
the street.
responsive right now. He's not responsive right now, bro.
Does he have a pulse?
No, bro, look at him. He's not responsive right now, bro.
Check for a pulse.
Bro, are you serious? He's gonna just let him sit there with that on his neck,
Let me see a
bro?
pulse.
Is he breathing right now? Check his
How long
pulse.
will we have this conversation?
Check his pulse.
Okay.
Check his pulse, Tal. Tal, check his pulse. Tal, check his pulse, bro. Bro, check his pulse, bro. You bogus, bro.
Don't do
you
drugs,
bogus.
guys.
Don't do drugs, bro.
Exactly.
What is that? What do you think that is? You call what he doing okay?
Get back
You
on the
call what
street.
he doing okay?
All right, Andrew Trukowski, how about the case against Tu Tao, who is not restraining George Floyd, but is doing crowd control?
Vinny, I'm going to talk like a criminal defense lawyer for a second. And some of this might not be exactly how I see it personally or how a juror might see it, but I'm going to tell you what a criminal defense attorney is going to talk about with this case, the King case, and really all of them, including Chauvin. You're going to have to get into the minds of the officers. And if you want to win this case as a criminal defense attorney or highly mitigate it, you're going to need to put your clients on the stand. Because here we are all putting in the minds of these officers the worst possible intent. And we see that officer holding people back. If he gets on the stand and he talks about how terrified he was, not knowing how to keep them back and also check to see what was going on, if you really personalize it and you allow the jury to feel what they may have been feeling, if it's the truth, that will, I believe, highly mitigate these cases for at least some of these officers, including what I'm calling the three bystander officers. So I think that's going to be important. And ultimately, if you put them on the stand, that's your avenue to a potential victory or mitigation here.
All right, Thomas Lane was the other rookie. He's the one who first approaches George Floyd. Let's take a look at that moment, and then again, that moment where he is part of the three that are restraining George Floyd, and he speaks with Chauvin.
Let me see your hands.
Damn, man.
Stay in the car. Let me see your other hand.
I'm sorry.
Let me see your other hand.
Please, Ms. Officer.
Both hands.
Do nothing.
Put your hands up right now. Let me see your other hand.
All right. What I do, though? What did we do?
Put your hand up there. Put your hand up there. Keep your hands on the wheel. Keep your hands on the wheel.
Yes, sir. My face getting bad.
Here, should we get his legs up?
Oh, it's all right. Nope, just leave him. Just leave him. Yep, just leave him.
All right. Roll him on the side.
No, leave him. Just stand put where you got him.
I just worry about the delirium or whatever.
Last fight, man.
Okay.
All right, Teresa, I've had a lot of guests on this show through the months and through the summer who have said the crime began when Lane pulled the weapon upon the initial approach. I've had other guests who've said, no, he put the gun back in the holster as soon as there was compliance by George Floyd in putting the hands where the officer could see them. How do you see that part of the body cam, and what impact does it have on the trial against Thomas Lane in August?
That's horrible for Thomas Lane. And I think that is what starts this whole situation. I mean, at this point, I'm sure it's going to come out that the reason they were called was because of a $20 counterfeit bill. And to compare that with this officer walking up on the side of the door, just immediately pulling a gun out already when, this country's emotions are already inflamed. That is a horrible fact for Officer Lane. It's not going to bode well with the trial, and I believe that is the catalyst that really ultimately led to Mr. Floyd's death. So I agree. Him pulling out that weapon initially is what started this whole series of events, and it's not going to work out well for him in a trial.
Andrew, does that take him out of the bystander category?
It certainly starts it out that way. I think we have some thug-like behavior going on here. And that's the theme that the prosecution is going to carry throughout this, is that they start in this modality of just being a thug, just being rough, being overly dramatic in the way that they're approaching somebody. That's obviously going to increase the odds that it turns into a negative situation and gets to the point where you have people who are injured, or in the case of George Floyd, murdered. And I think that's what a jury is going to see in this.
Yep.
Shawn, initially I said the case against Chauvin, I think, is stronger when he's by himself. But on the flip side, I think the case against these three is weaker without Chauvin there, because it's a classic case of co-defendants pointing the finger at the person who is not there.
Yeah, look, no case against a cop is easy, even the case against Chauvin on his own. We are just so culturally inclined to favor cops. Even that's a difficult case. But I certainly agree that the case against the other three, severed from Chauvin, first of all, I think it's wrong. I think it's wrong. When the trial judge scheduled originally all of these cops to go on trial together, his justification was absolutely correct, in my opinion. He wanted the jury to see the complete picture. There's an entire story here that belongs together as one package, not in two separate packages. The impact of Chauvin's presence in this crime should not be severed from the other three. I don't think the jury, the one who decides this, gets a fair picture of everything that goes on when they're judging the other three and Chauvin is not a part of that trial. The judge also, his other justification for trying all of them together, I also thought was quite valid. So this is an extraordinary case. Whatever the result, there's going to be extraordinary impact on the community. And the judge's original rationale in trying them together was let's not have the community have to absorb a shock more than once. But as to Lane, just one other thing, if I may, as to Lane, when he pulled that gun and used that tone of voice, that's the moment at which the cops chose to treat George Floyd like an animal and not like a human being. And to me, it overlays everything that happened after that. That was a decision that this was not a human being. This was not an individual entitled to be treated like a human being. Everything went downhill from there. And we see the catastrophic result.
All right, we got a lot more to talk about tonight. When we come back, we're going to take you to Arizona.